we are going to talk a little bit about Tennessee basketball. This typically happens during Tennessee football's bye week. It seems like basketball practices for the preseason always begin. And Rick Barnes spoke with the media yesterday. I wouldn't cover it too much in the heat of football season, but I want to get into something, Jimmy, that kind of stood out to me yesterday, which is last offseason, I was very critical, or I'm sorry, last season. And since he's been at Tennessee, I thought Rick Barnes was a solid hire, but I've always been critical that I felt like he was so old school with his love for the mid-range and defense. And he didn't believe in utilizing the perimeter the way he should, knowing the way college basketball is going. Then I saw how he went in the transfer portal this offseason, got a lot more three-point shooters. And he said yesterday at one point, quote, "I know we have more depth on the perimeter than we've had since we've been here. And up to this point, we've shown we can shoot the ball. But I just know that we've got a long way to go defensively," unquote. Is this a good sign for Tennessee that maybe finally Rick Barnes is building a perimeter-based team to keep up with the sport?
Caleb, I don't know. So if you look at the last 2 years with men's basketball, in exhibition games, they'll take 44 three-pointers. The first couple of games of the year, they take 40 three-pointers. And then they start getting into SEC play and they take 12 or 18. They scale it back. They go back to what they were before. So you think they're going to be a prolific or at least shoot a lot more threes. And then as each week goes by, it seems like they would take fewer threes. So I don't know if that's Barnes feeling uncomfortable. He wants to try this three-point thing and see how it's going to go. And then if he doesn't feel like it's working to his satisfaction, he scales it back and they take fewer threes. That's what I've noticed the last 2 years. Is that going to be the same case this year? I don't know. He's got a lot of pretty good three-point shooters. This guy, Kenneth, that came in, he's a really good player. I had a chance to watch practice the other day. He's really good. Gainey's a good three-point shooter. Ziegler's an okay three-point shooter. He's a threat out there. Vescovy has been their best three-point shooter in recent years. Jordan James is inconsistent. Every now and then he'll pop in a few threes, and then he'll go 1 for 7. But I do think they have the capability of being a much better three-point shooting team. Now, he may be a little bit forced into that from this perspective. Caleb, tell me who is their consistent inside scorer? Who's that guy? Is it Jonas Adu? No, we haven't seen that. Is it going to be a Waka? I don't know. I don't know who is going to be the inside. See, and I think that hurt them last year. They didn't have somebody they could go to inside to get a basket when the other team's on a 6-0 or an 8-0 run. So those runs became 14-2 or 18-4 because they had trouble getting a basket. So I'll be interested to see. I still think while they can be a better three-point shooting team, Caleb, I still think they've got to find an inside guy that can get them a basket to stop some of these runs from other teams, or to be a consistent inside scorer, which also, as you know, helps you get open on the perimeter.
Right. I wonder if they think that Adu is their guy long-term, only because I wonder, do you think that might have been the reason Olivier Nkamwa entered the transfer portal? He thought he couldn't beat out Adu this offseason?
No, he would have started. I actually think Nkamwa preferred to be coached less hard. I will say that. So I think he just felt like it's time to me to get a fresh start somewhere else. But Nkamwa was a starter anyway. So and then he would have a great game. He might get you 27 points in one game and then 2 or 4 the next game. He wasn't consistently good. When you look at his final numbers, they're all right. But I think he preferred less hard coaching, and that's why he left.
Okay. I could see that. I would say I get your point too, because the thing that he did against Duke last year, for instance, when a team drops into a zone and the shot's not falling, who's going to be that guy that can catch the ball right at the free throw line and make that 15-foot jumper? And they may not have that. But I do think that I think Rick Barnes' philosophy, and I want to know your thoughts on this, has been long-term. I think it's a philosophy that actually would have been better suited for the NBA than college, which is that in the NBA defense, I know they say it doesn't play defense, but the best defensive teams usually do win championships because over a 7-game series, defense wins out. But in March Madness, when it's win or go home, you need shooters because you're going to run into a team that's red hot shooting no matter what. And you got to be able to hang with them, don't you?
You do. Yeah, you've got to have offensive production. And The deeper you get in the NCAA tournament, the tighter some of your players get as far as shooting. So that's why you've got to have a lot of good shooters that don't. In other words, a 45% shooter becomes a 40% shooter, or a 48-point shooter, 48% shooter goes to 42, usually in postseason play. So that's why you've got to have guys that are in that 50% range. So when they fall off a little bit, it's not, they're not shooting 38%. But typically when Tennessee gets ousted in the NCAA tournament, what happens? It's a poor shooting game. And that's what's cost them in recent years. They just now Duke, they were outstanding. And then the next game when they should win, they can't throw it in the ocean. So you've got to be able to score. It's a little bit like the modern day college football. You got to be able to score in college football. You can't sit there and say, I'm going to win 10-6. No, that doesn't happen. So you got to have a good offensive team and you've got to have good shooters.
Yeah, and in basketball, it's one of those sports where I'd say if it's a perfect offense and a perfect defense, basically my phrase is, if Jesus Christ is guarding Jesus Christ, the offense is going to win in basketball, because perfect offense beats perfect defense in basketball every time. I don't care how good your defense is. If someone's hitting their shots, there's nothing you can do to stop that at all. And
they didn't have the 3-point play when he was playing. 3-point shot wasn't there.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. They didn't have it when he was playing. But yeah, so that's where I kind of go. Where with football, would you say with football still, I know there's a lot more scoring, but if the perfect offense and the perfect defense happens in a play, would you say still the defense wins, or would you say the offense
No,
wins?
I think that's changed. I think offensive players are so skilled now, and a lot of it comes from these 7-on-7 camps. I think the perfect pass gets completed against the perfect defense. So I would say the offense would succeed there. We might ask TCU about that. See how they fared against Georgia.
So. That's a good point. Well, as you and I knew, and as everybody who followed the SEC last year knew, I mean, Georgia beat Tennessee 27-13, but their offense was really, if they wanted to, they could have put up 55 points against Tennessee easily in that game. And I think Kirby Smart chose to run the clock to keep Tennessee's offense from getting in rhythm.
Yeah, he did. I don't know about 55, but certainly a whole lot more than 27. And he may need. I'll be curious to see how many he needs this year. But he did take his foot off the gas. That is true. But here's the thing too. Georgia last year, they would take their foot off the gas when they had scored 40. They're having trouble getting to 40, even against weak teams. So I'll be curious to see if Carson Beck improves. They got a really good running back. This DeJuan Williams, I think it is, or Edwards. He's a really good back. They've got pretty good receivers. I had been told that Ladd McConkey had been out for a while. Brock Bowers was nicked up early in the year. That's why he wasn't productive, but he's been great the last 2 games. So maybe that'll help jumpstart that offense.
Yeah, which would be scary for the rest of the SEC if they haven't hit another gear yet.
Yeah.
I'll let you address this, because I've had fights with many Tennessee fans over my time, Jimmy, about, speaking of comebacks and sitting on a lead. I think the most annoying narrative to me is when people in the Knoxville community and the Tennessee Vols community try to make the case that Peyton Manning put up a gutsy performance and Tennessee fought back against Florida in 96 and almost won. Florida let Tennessee back in that game, didn't they? They took their foot off the gas too early.
It's one of the few times I've ever seen Spurrier do that. Yeah, he took his foot off the pedal. It was 35-0, 20 minutes into that game. And then and Danny Werfel, if I'm not mistaken, Werfel threw for 155 yards. That's all. Florida ran the football in the second half to run the clock. Manning had an awful first half. I think he threw 4 interceptions in that game. He was terrible. And then in the second half, Florida took the foot off the pedal, didn't run. They ran the football trying to run the clock, and then they started playing a little bit softer in coverage so they wouldn't give up a 70-yard pass. But Tennessee was never in that football game. And they had to score late to make it 35-29. That was a late score. It wasn't like they had a chance. They cut it to a touchdown. No, that score was so late. That game was over after the first 20 minutes, I thought.
Yeah, I thought so too. It was my revelation that at the time, now it's different now, but during that time, I felt like most 300, 400-yard games, because Peyton Manning threw for like 466, most 300, 400-yard games happen when a quarterback is trying to bring his team back and the defense is just playing soft coverage and letting you move the ball down the field.
Yeah, I think in that era that was true. Now the way offenses are, they're throwing for 400 yards, like Caleb Williams out of Southern Cal with a lead. So I do think the offensive perspective's changed in recent years. But at that time, Caleb, I think you're exactly right. When you look at the most yards that Andy Kelly threw for, Peyton Manning, they were typically in losses.
They were. I think Andy Kelly's best game was that Notre Dame game in 1990, which Tennessee did almost win, but they had to recover an onside kick. It would have been a lucky win had they won.
Yeah.